When I talk about the Red Army, most people will think about the Second World War. But what were the origins of this army? Well, the Red Army was founded by Bolshevik leader Leon Trotsky involved in the Russian Civil War, where it expanded to a mass army with millions of men. In this video, you're going to learn about the origins of the Red Army. Keep watching. Hey, good to have you back on the channel. If you are new to History Hustle, welcome to the channel. My name is Stefan, I'm a Dutch history teacher and I like to make videos about history for you. And if you find it interesting, consider subscribing, hit the notification bell and join the hustle. During the 1905 Russian Revolution, militant workers organized themselves into paramilitary units known as the Red Guards. These came to the scene again in February 1917. These Red Guards had to protect strategic posts such as factories where workers were recruited. Initially, these men were not directly aligned to the Bolsheviks, but they did help the Bolsheviks with seizing power in Petrograd in October 1917. They took part in storming the Winter Palace and arresting people as well as seizing power in Moscow. These men were volunteers and its commanders were chosen by elections. Among its ranks were idealistic youths, but also criminals. At the time of the October Revolution, they numbered some 200,000 men. And with the arrival of demobilized soldiers from the front of the First World War, their numbers increased. In September 1918, they were officially dissolved, although Red Guards remained stationed at more remote regions. Many of them joined the Red Army that was established early 1918. But this was not always easy because they were accustomed to basically behaving as they liked. But they did not really like the discipline that was enforced in the Red Army. Others joined the Soviet secret police, the che-krestья. The new regime had to establish its distance from the old culture of command. A decree in December abolished ranks along with their privileges and insignia. The term specialist replaced officer. Red Army men replaced soldier. The Red Army was officially established in January 1918. Its full name was the Workers' and Peasants' Red Army. This army was founded by Leon Trotsky. He decided to build an army from the ground up. The front of World War I was disintegrating, and so was the Russian army. The men had no more will to fight. As Russian army commander Mikhail Dmitrievich von Bruyevich stated, "The army is altogether unsuitable for combat and is in no condition to hold back the enemy. The Soviet Republic needed an army, not the old army, but an army compatible with socialist principles and capable of defending the new regime." And the revolution was in danger, because the Bolsheviks had seized power in the main cities Petrograd and Moscow, while its opponents, that were known as the Whites, gathered in the peripheries. Early January, the peace talks between Soviet Russia and the Central Powers deadlocked. Mid-February, the impatient Central Powers, Germany and Austria-Hungary, they launched Operation Faustschlag, and they could pretty much walk to Petrograd unopposed. Leon Trotsky did his best to rally the men for defending the capital of the revolution. "Comrades, our Soviet Socialist Republic must have a well-organized army. Exhausted and unarmed Russia will inevitably become the slave of the united forces of international imperialism unless we are saved in time by the support of the international proletariat and unless we organize our own defense. The question of creating an army is for us now a question of life and death." The demobilization of the Tsarist army continued till mid-April, as the Red Army was founded in January. Initially, admission was highly selective, and volunteers required a recommendation from a military body or trade union that was in line with the Bolshevik Party. Dedicated men needed to be found. Its first baptism of fire was alongside Red Guards against the Germans at Pskov and Narva. The conflict between the Germans and Soviet Russia lasted short, as a peace deal was signed on the 3rd of March, that became known as the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. Soviet Russia had to cede large swaths of land to the Central Powers. With the Central Powers gone as a potential enemy, the Bolsheviks could now focus on their internal enemies, and these were the Whites. The Whites were a diverse group of anti-Bolshevik forces that opposed the Red Army and the Bolshevik government. They were made of various factions, including monarchists, Democrats, liberals, and socialists, who all shared a common goal of overthrowing the Bolsheviks, and most of them wanted to restore a more traditional and conservative government. On the 4th of March, the Supreme Military Soviet was set up that took care of the development of the Red Army. 6 military districts were created and the military commissariats were created at all levels. 58th Infantry Divisions, specialist and technical troops, as well as armor, artillery and cavalry units were set up. Now the next month there were 150,000 men in its ranks, and this grew to 200,000 in the following month. At that point there were no training centers, there were no uniforms. There was no standardization. By the end of that year, 50 training schools for Red Army commanders were set up. The goal was still to train a new generation of Red commanders. Commissars were still in use as ideological watchdogs, but hierarchy and the threat of execution were back. Field tribunals were created to impose the death penalty on soldiers, officers, and commissars guilty of treason, sabotage, desertion, or looting. On the initiative of Trotsky, nearly 22,000 former Tsarist officers were re-employed in the Red Army as so-called military specialists, and 130,000 former Tsarist NCOs were re-employed, which proved vital for professionalizing the Red Army. Did you know that in the month after the October Revolution, all persons had to address each other as citizen first, гражданин, and soon with comrade, tovarish. In the Red Army there were only 2 ranks: Red Army men, krasnoarmiets, and Red Commander, krasny komandir, or in short, kraskom. Ranks were introduced in 1935. In May 1918, the Soviet government decided to issue conscription for men between the ages of 18 and 40, and they needed men as many Red Army soldiers deserted en masse. Idealistic youth saw their dreams dashed as the Whites approached in on them, and many farmers went home for the harvest. By the end of 1918, there were 12 field armies numbering more than 285,000 infantry and cavalry. Overall command was in the hands of the Revolutionary Military Council of Republics, the RMSR, headed by Trotsky. Unique was the presence of commissars that were later known as political officers. These were mostly trusted party members that had to keep an eye on the officers' behavior and attitude. Effectively, the commissars were political spies whose adverse reports could lead, at the very least, to a reprimand and a bad mark in an officer's dossier. So it is unsurprising that their relationships with line officers were often strained. A unit commander could not make a decision without consulting his commissar, who often had little or no military education. Commissars also kept a close watch on the rankers of their units and relied upon loyal party members among the soldiers to keep them informed. Now, every soldier in the Red Army had a booklet which outlined his rights, duties, and norms of conduct. By December 1919, the Red Army numbered over 3 million men, and in the following year it reached a number of 5.5 million. These men remained under arms till 1924, when the Red Army demobilized to around 500,000 men. The highest operational unit was the so-called front. A front was given a geographical name and comprised between 2 and 5 field armies, as well as detached forces, reserve units, specialist troops, and administrative organs. And during the Russian Civil War, there were the following fronts. The Northern Front fought against the Whites and interventionist forces in the north and was later incorporated in the Western Front. This was the most important part of the Soviet border, and they faced the Baltics and Poland. The Ukrainian Front operated against Ukrainian nationalists, the Whites and their foreign allies, as well as the Poles in Ukraine, as well as on the Crimea. The Southern Front operated in the area between Ukraine to the Azov Sea. It was later renamed Southwestern Front. It fought against Denikin's forces, but also on Crimea. The Turkestan Front fought in Central Asia and saw action against the Basmachi movement that fought till the 1930s. The Caspian Caucasian Front was eventually disbanded to the Southern Front, and the Eastern Front fought against the Czechoslovak Legion and white troops of the Urals and Siberia. There were infantry, cavalry and armored units, and there was also the che-ka. Its full name would be the All-Russian Extraordinary Commission to Combat Counter-Revolution and Sabotage. It was the first secret police of the Soviets. The che-ka was founded by Felix Dzerzhinsky, as Dzerzhinsky stated. The che-ka is not an investigation commission, a court or tribunal. It is a fighting organ on the internal front of the civil war. It does not judge, it strikes. It does not pardon, it destroys all who are caught on the other side of the barricade. Now, unsurprisingly, the men of the Red Army fought with weapons of the old Tsarist army. Most well known was the Russian surface rifle, the 7.62mm Mosin Nagant M1891. Cavalry was equipped with the Mosin M1908 carbine. The standard revolver was the 7.62mm Nagant M1895. Looking at machine guns, the Maxim M1910 was used. Did you know that this machine gun is used in the Ukraine war today? And then also Russian mortars were used. Apart from Russian weapons, the Red Army also made use of stockpiles of weapons from vanquished enemies. For example, they captured weapons from the Central Powers, which evacuated Ukraine after 11th of November 1918 and therefore left Mauser M1898 and Austrian Mannlicher M1895 for the taking. On this photograph, you see Red Army soldiers with the Japanese Arisakas M1905. I don't know whether these were stockpiles of the Russo-Japanese War, which I doubt, or weapons from the Japanese interventionist forces. Much of the Allied delivery weaponry came in red hands due to corruption. A favorite was the American Winchester M1895. Well known are the armored trains, which received numbers and names. Trotsky used one named Revolutionary Military Soviet to transfer to and between the fronts to motivate the men. Looking at armor, the Allied interventionist forces gave tanks to the Whites who were captured by the Reds. They were later put on display. Here you see images of a British World War I tank that I recorded when I was visiting Kharkiv, Ukraine in the summer of 2019. Initially, there was no standardization when it came down to uniforms. Red Guardsmen wore all kinds of clothing, from civilian to military, as you can see here on this photograph. They were not more than a red ribbon or an armband. The choice of red as a color needs some explanation. For centuries, this was a symbol of mutiny and brigandage. In naval use, it meant defiance and was hoisted when preparing for battle. In Russian, the word red, krasny, has a second meaning, pretty. And then there was the Red Star. The party line was that the five-pointed star stood for the 5 continents where the revolution had to be carried out. Here you see a hammer and a plow cockade used by the Red Army from 1918 to 1922, when it was replaced by the hammer and sickle. And here you see sleeve insignia of the command staff of the Red Army introduced in 1919. A distinctive uniform was the long greatcoat with colored tabs and the pointed hat. There is a story this uniform was already designed in 1913 to commemorate the 300th anniversary of the Romanov dynasty. The 3 tabs stood for the 3 centuries. But in reality, the RMSR initiated a competition in May 1918. And in December, new headgear was chosen, as well as the color of the tabs that was announced early 1919. And the new headgear became the Budenovka, named after Simeon Budeny. Here I have a cheap replica that I bought in St. Petersburg when I visited the city in the summer of 2019. I even have a photograph with it together with Lenin, who basically charged me way too much money for that. I was totally ripped off by Lenin. You know, obviously it's a cheap replica, but I believe where it basically comes down to is that you can detach these sides, and then when it's cold, you can do this. Although I can't see anything, but well, you get the point. The Red Army troops wore a greatcoat of khaki cloth with 3 tabs in branch of service color. Red for infantry, orange and later black for artillery and blue for cavalry. As for trousers, breeches were often worn with leather boots or ankle boots with puttees. Throughout the 1920s, it remained an army that was not the best dressed by West European standards. Looking at this picture from the 1920s with Polish and Soviet border guards, you can see what I mean. The che-ka, Soviet secret police on the other hand, they were much better dressed. From head to toe, they were dressed in black leather and had all kinds of weaponry to safeguard the revolution. Read to commit terror. Thanks to my patrons, you see their names right now, and a special thanks to Thomas Zabiega, Damian Wallace, Connor, Philip Jordan, Marcus Kaas, Nick Terranova, Haley, Mark Littlehill, Janik Jojankiewicz, Joanne, Justin Tabell, Tanya Dixie, Henry Clarkson, Rob Park, Andrea Martic, Susanna Di Bella, John Beach, Fabrizio, Way Back History, Fernando Lopez Ojeda, and Mike West. Now if you want to learn more about the che-ka, check out this video. And I also have a video on the White Armies. Click right here. And I thank you for watching, and das vidania.